Captain Elena Vasquez slammed her fist on the console, the holographic display flickering under the impact as alarms blared through the cramped bridge of the UNS Reliant. "All hands, battle stations! They've locked weapons on our flank, evasive maneuvers now." Her voice cut through the red-lit chaos like a knife, steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. Beside her, Lieutenant Marco Ruiz gripped the navigation controls, his fingers flying across the pads, while engineer Kira Novak hunched over the engineering feed, muttering curses under her breath. The alien fleet loomed on the viewscreen, a swarm of sleek iridescent ships from the Galactic Council, their formations precise as a scalpel. The Council had declared the uncharted nebula sector off-limits, citing some evolutionary mandate. Only advanced species worthy of expansion, they claimed. Humanity, with our messy wars and resource grabs, didn't qualify. But Elena's mission was clear: claim the rich mineral fields inside for Earth or watch colonies starve. No speeches, no diplomacy. Just get in, mine what they could, and get out before the Council's enforcers arrived. "Shields at 80%, Kira reported, her voice tight as she rerouted power from non-essentials. The ship lurched as a plasma bolt grazed their hull, sparks erupting from a nearby panel. Marco banked hard left, weaving through the nebula's glowing tendrils that distorted sensors and played havoc with targeting. "They're predicting our moves. Those bastards have adaptive AI," he growled, his dark eyes narrowed in focus. Elena nodded, her mind racing. The Council ships outclassed them in every metric: faster, smarter, cleaner tech. But humans had grit, the kind forged in backwater skirmishes and desperate improvisations. "Launch decoys," Elena ordered, leaning forward. "Pattern Delta. Make it look like we're breaking for the core." Marco complied, and false signatures bloomed on the scans, drawing fire from two pursuers. The Reliant slipped deeper into the nebula's haze, where visibility dropped to meters and comms turned to static. A direct hit rocked them then, consoles shuddering as inertial dampeners whined. "Hull breach in Cargo Bay 3, Kira shouted. "Sealing it off, lost half-hour ore haulers." Elena's jaw clenched. Those haulers were their ticket home, loaded with the first samples from the asteroid belt they'd cracked open hours ago. Losing them meant empty holds, a failed op, and courts-martial waiting planetside. But retreat wasn't an option. The Council would glass the site to deny it to lesser races. "Reroute thrusters, use the gas clouds for cover. We're not leaving without a fight." She patched into the external cams, spotting the faint glow of the Council's lead vessel closing in, its weapons array humming with restrained power. Marco glanced at her, doubt flickering in his eyes for the first time. "Captain, their evolutionary protocols mean they won't board us. They'll just vaporize anything that doesn't surrender. We're outgunned 3-1. Elena met his gaze, her expression unyielding. "That's their high ground, Marco. We play from the dirt." She tapped the comms, broadcasting on open channels. "Council vessel, this is UNS Reliant. Stand down or we'll detonate the nebula core. Your fancy shields won't save you from a chain reaction." Silence stretched, broken only by the hum of straining engines. Then a response crackled through. The alien's voice modulated and serene, as if lecturing children. "Primitive aggressors, your threat is illogical. Cease your incursion or face extinction in the name of galactic harmony." Elena smirked, signaling Kira. In the engine room, hidden charges, cobbled from mining explosives, armed silently, keyed to a proximity trigger. It was a bluff mostly. The core detonation would take them all, but the Council didn't know that. Humans lied, cheated, survived. The lead ship hesitated, its trajectory faltering as scans probed the nebula's heart. Elena's team held their breath, the bridge thick with tension. One wrong move and they'd be stardust. But in that pause she saw their opening, the moral low ground where desperation bred ingenuity. "Full burn toward the asteroids," she whispered. "Let's show them what evolution really looks like." The engines thrummed like a heartbeat under strain as Elena's ship, the Reliant, surged forward into the asteroid field's edge. Shards of rock loomed in the viewport, tumbling lazily against the nebula's glow. Each one a potential hammer to their hull. Kira's hands flew over the console, plotting a jagged course through the debris. "Holding steady, Captain. But if they follow, we're dancing on a knife's edge." Elena gripped the armrest, eyes locked on the tactical display. The Council's lead vessel, a sleek iridescent cruiser named the Arbitrator, had broken formation, its sensors sweeping the void like predatory eyes. They were buying time, but the bluff's fuse burned short. The hidden charges in the engine room mimicked a doomsday device, scavenged from their mining hauler days. But one deep scan would reveal the lie. No yield without mutual annihilation. "Keep her nimble," Elena said, her voice low and steady. "We weave, we don't charge." From the co-pilot's seat, Marco wiped sweat from his brow, his usual easy grin replaced by a tight line. The wiry engineer, always the one cracking jokes over ration packs, now muttered coordinates under his breath. "Asteroids at Mark 7 incoming. That's a big bastard, looks like it could crack us like an egg." He adjusted thrusters with a flick, the ship shuddering as it banked hard left, grazing a boulder the size of a shuttle. The comms crackled to life, the Council's voice returning, smooth and condescending as polished alloy. "Human vessel, your evasion is futile. Surrender your crew for re-education. The evolutionary hierarchy demands compliance." Elena's lip curled. Re-education? Council speak for breaking spirits in sterile labs, turning fighters into compliant drones. She'd seen the vids from the outer colonies. Humans reduced to shadows, their fire snuffed. "Not today," she whispered to herself, then keyed the mic. "Hierarchy? That's rich coming from parasites who glass planets for harmony." She cut the line before their retort, signaling Marco. "Divert power to shields, front heavy. We're going to bounce one off them if they get too close." Kira glanced up, her sharp features etched with doubt. The navigator, cautious to a fault, had argued against the charges from the start. "Captain, if we clip even a fragment wrong..." Her words trailed as the Reliant twisted, the asteroid field swallowing them whole. Alarms blared, a proximity warning as the arbitrator accelerated, its tractor beams flickering to life. The first rock hit like thunder, not theirs but a stray the Council ship nudged into their path. The Reliant jolted, sparks erupting from a panel. Marco cursed, slamming a sealant patch over a venting line. "Hull breach, miner. We're venting Atmo from Cargo Bay 3. Elena's mind raced. Cargo Bay 3 held their emergency pods, the last lifeline if the engines gave out. "Seal it and reroute," she ordered, unstrapping to lean over Kira's shoulder. The display showed the arbitrator closing, its weapons arrays charging with an ominous hum transmitted through the scans. They needed a play, something to turn the field's chaos against the pursuer. Humans didn't win with superior tech. They won with what was at hand. "Listen," Elena said, pointing to a cluster of loosely bound rocks ahead, a natural sling in the void. "We thread the needle there. Use the momentum to slingshot back. They'll have to break or follow blind." Kira's eyes widened, but she nodded, fingers dancing across the controls. Marco patched in from engineering via intercom. "Charges still hot, Cap, proximity triggers live. If they get within a click." The ship plunged deeper, the viewport a blur of gray and purple haze. The arbitrator fired a warning shot, a plasma lance searing past, vaporizing a distant asteroid into glittering dust. Heat washed over the bridge, the acrid smell of ozone filling the air. Elena's pulse hammered. One miss and they'd be adrift, easy pickings for the Council's boarding parties. As they approached the cluster, Kira's voice cut sharp. Trajectory locked. "But it's tight. Gravity wells overlapping." The Reliant groaned, metal protesting as it accelerated into the gap. Elena watched the scanner, the arbitrator mirroring, arrogant in its power. But humans knew desperation's edge. It sharpened the mind. In that split second, Marco's voice broke through. "Idea. Rig the cargo ejectors. Dump the mining drones as decoys laced with charge residue. Make 'em think we're arming the field." Elena's eyes lit. "Improvise. Always improvise. Do it. Kira, adjust for the mass shift." The ship shuddered again, deeper this time, as the slingshot pulled them around. Drones launched in a swarm, tiny, sparks against the stars, their hulls smeared with explosive traces from the engine room sabotage. The arbitrator veered, scans lighting up with false positives. For a heartbeat, the gap widened. But then a beam clipped their flank, shearing off a sensor array. Lights flickered, gravity stuttering. Elena braced as consoles sparked. "Damage report." Marco's reply was grim. "Shields at 30%. We're leaking fuel. Won't make the nebula's cover." The stakes twisted tighter. No fuel meant no escape, no bluff left to play. Kira fought the controls, sweat beading on her forehead. They're adapting, locking tractors. Elena's jaw set. The moral low ground wasn't clean, but it was theirs. Full reverse on thrusters, slam the drones into their path, let the field do the rest. It was reckless, a gamble that could shred them first. But as the Reliant spun, engines roaring defiance, she felt the shift. The asteroids closed in, a deadly ballet, and for the first time, the Council's ship hesitated. Elena gripped the armrests as the Reliant lurched backward, the deck plates groaning under the strain of reversed thrust. Alarms wailed in staccato bursts, painting the bridge in pulsing red. Through the viewport, the Council's sleek interceptor loomed larger for a heartbeat before the debris field swallowed the space between them. "They're firing probes," Marco shouted, his fingers dancing over the tactical display. A holographic map flickered, showing the enemy ship's tractor beams lashing out like ethereal whips, snagging the drones Elena had just sacrificed. The field of asteroids, jagged remnants of some long-forgotten cataclysm, began to shift, tugged by the artificial gravity wake. Kira yanked the yoke hard, sweat stinging her eyes. Holding her steady, but these rocks are magnetized. One wrong nudge and we're paced. The ship shuddered as a boulder the size of a shuttle clipped their flank, sparks erupting from the hull. Elena tasted blood from where she'd bitten her lip. The moral low ground meant playing dirty, turning the environment into a weapon, but it demanded precision they barely had. "Divert power to forward deflectors," Elena ordered, her voice cutting through the din like a blade. "Marco, target their probe emitters. Don't let them clear a path." She watched the scanner feeds. The Council's vessel, all elegant curves and evolutionary arrogance, was designed for open skirmishes, not this chaotic grind. Humans built for survival in the grit, the aliens for dominance in the stars. Marco nodded, his cautious nature yielding to the fire in his eyes. Firing now. Twin lances of plasma streaked from the Reliant's ventral batteries, slicing through the void. One probe exploded in a silent bloom of fire, but the second latched onto an asteroid, pulling it aside. The Council's ship edged forward, its hull glowing with energy shields that hummed superiority. A new alert pierced the bridge, fuel reserves dipping critically low. Elena's mind raced. Without escape velocity, they'd be sitting ducks once the field thinned. "Kira, plot a slingshot trajectory around that big cluster dead ahead. Use the rock's momentum against them." It was ingenuity born of desperation slinging, the Reliant like a stone from a primitive catapult, but the calculations were razor thin. As the ship accelerated into the maelstrom, asteroids whirled past in a deadly haze. The Council's interceptor mimicked the move, closing the gap with predatory grace. Elena felt the weight of it all, their small crew against an armada's vanguard, humanity's stubborn refusal to yield the stars. One hit, and the low ground would bury them. Kira's hands trembled on the controls, but her voice stayed steady, committing to the arc. "Hold on." The Reliant dove, engines flaring blue against the black, and the asteroid loomed like a god's fist, promising either salvation or oblivion. The Reliant shuddered as the asteroid's gravitational pull seized it, yanking the ship into a wild spin. Kira fought the controls, sweat beading on her forehead, while Elena braced against the console, her eyes locked on the tactical display. The Council's interceptor was right behind, its sleek form slicing through the debris like a scalpel through flesh. "They're matching our vector," Marco called from engineering, his voice crackling over the intercom. "If we don't shake them in, the next 30 seconds they'll board us before we clear the field." Elena nodded, her mind racing. The plan had been simple. Use the asteroid's mass to slingshot them out of the Council's pursuit range, but nothing in space was ever that clean. "Kira, adjust for the spin. Give us a burst on the port thrusters to widen the arc." Kira's fingers flew across the panel. The ship groaned in protest, metal creaking as the engines fired unevenly. Rocks pinged off the hull, each impact a reminder of how thin their margin was. One solid hit, and the Reliant would be scrap, leaving them adrift in the void. Easy pickings for the armada beyond. The interceptor loomed larger on the rear sensors, its weapons ports glowing with charged energy. A warning klaxon blared. Lock-on confirmed. Elena's stomach twisted. They couldn't outgun it. The Council ships were built for precision strikes. Their tech evolved over centuries of unchallenged dominance. Humanity's edge was grit, not gadgets. Divert power from life support, Elena ordered. All to forward shields. Buy us time. Marco hesitated, his face appearing on the split-screen feed etched with doubt. That'll drop oxygen reserves fast. We might not make it to the exit vector breathing easy. Do it, she snapped, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. He was the cautious one, always weighing the costs. But right now, survival trumped comfort. The ship lurched as power surged to the shields. The interceptor fired, a lance of plasma that splashed harmlessly against the reinforced barrier, lighting up the viewport in a brief, searing blue. The Reliant hurtled closer to the asteroid's surface, jagged craters rushing up like open maws. Kira whooped suddenly, a rare crack in her focus. We're pulling ahead. The rock's gravity is warping their trajectory. They're compensating too slow. Elena allowed herself a tight smile. Human reflexes, honed on worlds where failure meant death by inches, not simulations. The Council pilots, for all their evolutionary superiority, relied on predictive algorithms that choked on chaos like this. But the asteroid's pull intensified, the spin threatening to tear them apart. Alarms wailed as structural integrity dipped. Marco's voice cut in again, urgent. Hull breach in Bay 3, sealing it now, but we're venting atmosphere. Elena, we need to break free or we're done. She scanned the display, spotting a narrow channel through the debris, a gamble, threading the needle between tumbling boulders. Kira, take us in, full burn on the mains. The pilot didn't argue. The Reliant dove into the gap, engines roaring. Boulders whipped past, so close Elena could see the dust clouds on their surfaces. The interceptor tried to follow, but a stray rock clipped its wing, sending it tumbling off course with a burst of escaping plasma. They cleared the asteroid's influence in a final bone-jarring burst. The stars stabilized on the viewport, the Reliant coasting into open space. Cheers erupted over the comms, short and fierce. Elena exhaled, checking the readouts. They'd bought distance, but the Council's main fleet was still out there, vectors updating in real time. And Bay 3's breach meant repairs they couldn't afford with dwindling supplies. Status? She asked, voice level. Marco wiped his brow. Stable, but we're down to 70% integrity, and oxygen's ticking low. Kira leaned back, her hands finally still. We made it through the maelstrom, for now. Elena stared at the pursuing blips on the screen. The low ground might keep them alive a little longer, but the Council wouldn't forget this defiance. Humanity's fight was just beginning and the cost was already mounting. Elena gripped the armrests of her command chair, eyes locked on the tactical display as the Reliant shuddered through another microjump. The engines whined in protest, but the vector held, barely. Behind them, the Council's interceptor swarmed like angry hornets, their formation tightening with predatory precision. They're gaining, Marco reported from engineering, his voice crackling over the internal comm. Sweat beaded on his forehead, visible even through the grainy feed. 0.5 light seconds and closing. If we push the core any harder, it'll melt down. Kira swiveled in her seat at the weapons console, fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Options? We can't outrun them forever. Elena didn't look up. The blips on the screen multiplied. The Council's evolutionary superiority wasn't just talk. Their ships adapted mid-chase, hulls shifting to optimize for pursuit. Humanity's ragtag fleet relied on grit and jury-rigged mods, but that low-ground pragmatism had kept them alive this long. Divert auxiliary power to shields. Marco, how's the breach in Bay 3? Patched with what we had, hydrogel seals and cargo netting. It'll hold against vacuum, but not a direct hit. He paused, the hum of his tools underscoring the tension. Oxygen recycles at 60% efficiency. We've got maybe 12 hours before it gets dicey. The ship lurched as an incoming plasma bolt grazed their port flank, alarms blaring in sharp bursts. Kira fired back, her torpedoes streaking out in a wild arc. Not elegant, but enough to scatter 2 interceptors into debris. That's one less on our tail, but they're learning our patterns. Elena's mind raced. The Council preached unity through genetic perfection. scorning humanity's barbaric improvisations. But out here in the void, morals were flexible. She keyed the comm to all hands. Listen up. We're not playing fair today. Kira, prep the decoy drones. Load them with our spare fusion cells. Marco, rig the exhaust vents to vent plasma residue. Make it look like we're venting drive plasma critical failure. Kira's eyes widened, a grin cracking her usual stoicism. Fake a core breach? Risky. If they buy it, they'll close in for the kill shot. That's the point. Elena's voice was steady, the weight of command settling like an old coat. They think we're desperate enough to blow ourselves up. Let them come. Marco chuckled darkly from below decks. On it. Give me 2 minutes. The Reliance corridors echoed with urgency as the crew scrambled. Elena watched the readouts, her pulse sinking with the ship's faltering rhythm. The Council's broadcast had vilified them. Primitives clinging to outdated ethics, defying the galaxy's enlightened order. But survival wasn't about high ground. It was about the dirtiest trick that worked. Alarms escalated as the decoy launched. Tiny drones mimicked the Reliance signature, blooming with false energy flares. On the display, the interceptors veered, weapons priming for the mercy kill. The lead ship, a sleek council cruiser, broadcast a demand. Surrender, humans. Your resistance is futile evolution. Kira leaned forward, whispering, they're biting. Elena nodded. Marco now, full burn on the vents. A plume of superheated gas erupted from the Reliance aft, simulating a catastrophic rupture. The ship played dead, drifting erratically as the council vessels closed to point-blank range. Tension coiled in Elena's chest. One wrong move and the ruse became reality. The cruiser fired, precision lances meant to finish the wounded prey. But Kira had already micro-jumped them sideways, the Reliance battered frame groaning under the strain. The shots vaporized the decoys instead, the explosion lighting up the viewport in a brilliant chaotic bloom. Counter-strike! Elena barked. Kira unleashed the real payload, modified railguns loaded with scavenged antimatter slugs. The shots punched through the cruiser's adaptive shields, exploiting the momentary overconfidence. Explosions rippled across the enemy's hull, shearing off weapons arrays in a cascade of fire. But victory came at a price. The micro-jump tore open the Bay 3 patch. Air whistled out in a frantic hiss. Marco's voice cut through. Breach widening. Losing atmo fast, seal it or we suffocate. Elena slammed the emergency bulkheads, but red lights flashed, partial failure. Crew in the lower deck scrambled for suits, faces pale in the emergency glow. Kira spun, grabbing a sealant kit. I'm on it. Cover me. As the remaining interceptors peeled away, regrouping at a safe distance, Elena watched her team fight. The Council's fleet loomed larger on the horizon, but they'd bought time. Precious blood-earned time. Humanity's low ground wasn't pretty, but it was theirs. The Reliant limped onward, oxygen alarms droning softly, a reminder that every wind carved deeper into their reserves. Kira wedged her boots into the grating, the sealant gun trembling in her gloved hands as the void clawed at the edges of the patch. Alarms wailed, a relentless pulse syncing with her heartbeat. The tear in the hull gaped like a wound, frost forming on the metal where atmosphere escaped in ragged bursts. Elena's status on the lower decks. Marco barked from the bridge feed, his voice tinny over the comms. All suited up, but we've got 3 injured, can't move 'em yet. Bulkheads holding at 60%. Elena's reply came sharp, her fingers flying over the console. She glanced at the tactical display, where the Council's interceptors circled like sharks scenting blood. The Reliance engines groaned, pushing them toward the nebula's edge, but the fleet was closing the gap. Kira fired the sealant, a thick foam expanding across the breach. It bubbled and hardened under the vacuum's pull, but a secondary crack spiderwebbed outward. Damn it, it's not taking. The hull's too stressed from the jump. She ducked as a loose panel whipped past, sucked toward the void. Abort and fall back, Marco ordered. We can't lose you too. No, I've got an idea. Kira's mind raced, piecing together scraps from engineering drills. The old maintenance drone in the bay, clunky, half-repaired from the last skirmish. If she could rig it to the emergency welder. She yanked the tether line tighter, inching forward. Her suit's oxygen gauge blinked yellow. 5 minutes left. On the bridge, Elena watched the drone feed, Kira's helmet cam showing the chaos up close. Marco, the Council's launching probes. They're scanning for weak points. Let them scan. We're not running blind. Marco leaned into the controls, plotting an erratic course through the nebula's gas clouds. The Reliant shuddered as ion storms buffeted the shields. He remembered the Council's broadcasts. Superior evolution, they called it. Their ships gleaming with adaptive tech that bent physics like clay. But humans? We bent rules. We survived on spite. Kira reached the drone bay, slamming the release. The machine tumbled free, its thrusters sputtering. She synced her suit's interface, overriding the failsafes with a jury-rigged code. Something she'd picked up from a black market sim back on Luna. Come on. You relic. The drone stabilized, clamping onto the hull beside the breach. She directed it to the welder pack. Sparks flying as it fused metal plates scavenged from internal bulkheads. A probe streaked past, its scan beam lancing through the foam. The sealant hissed, partially dissolving. Kira cursed, sweat beading inside her visor. It's targeting the patch. Divert power to countermeasures. Ilana complied, rerouting auxiliary energy. Flares erupted from the Reliance hull, blinding the probe in a burst of electromagnetic noise. It veered off, tumbling into the nebula. Got it, Kira grunted. The drone's welder sealed the secondary crack, the patch holding firm. Air pressure stabilized, the alarms dropping to a low hum. She retracted the tether, collapsing against the inner wall as the bay repressurized. Her suit's gauge hit red, 2 minutes of air spared by seconds. Marco exhaled, slapping the comms. Breach contained. Good work, Kira. Everyone, strap in. We're punching through the nebula. Elena nodded, though her eyes lingered on the injured count ticking up. The Council's moral high ground meant clean kills from afar, no mess, no cost. But here, in the grit of it, humans paid in blood and ingenuity. The Reliant surged forward, ghosts of the storm parting before them. As the ship emerged from the clouds, a new signal pinged. Reinforcements, human frigates warping in from the outer rim. Not enough to win outright, but enough to fight another day. Kira peeled off her helmet in the med bay, gulping recycled air. The victory tasted like rust, but it was theirs. The Council's fleet adjusted formation, their elegant lines fracturing against the human swarm. Kira wiped the sweat from her brow. The med bay's hum, a constant drone against her pounding headache. She glanced at the injured, 10 now, stabilized but moaning softly under the autodocks. Elena's voice crackled over the intercom, sharp and unyielding. Kira, bridge. We need you up here. Council's probing our flanks. She straightened, ignoring the twinge in her ribs from the earlier breach. The Reliance corridors blurred as she ran, boots pounding the grated deck. By the time she reached the bridge, the view screen showed it. Sleek Council destroyers darting like silverfish, testing the human line. Human frigates, scrappy, patched-together hulks, returned fire in ragged bursts, their missiles a chaotic spray compared to the Council's precise lancing beams. They're fainting, Elena said, her voice gravelly from hours without sleep. She pointed at the tactical overlay where red icons swarmed blue, trying to draw us into that asteroid field. One wrong move and we're debris. Kira slid into her station, fingers flying over the console. Options? We can't outrun them clean. Her mind raced, piecing together the ship's logs. The Reliant wasn't built for elegance. She was a hauler retrofitted for war, her hold still smelling of cargo grease. Elena leaned in, her cautious nature showing in the furrow of her brow. We could scatter the swarm, use the frigates as bait, but that risks losing them. She shot Kira a look, the witty edge in her eyes challenging. Or we do it the human way, dirty. Elena grunted approval. Dirty it is. Kira, rig the cargo bays, dump the decoys, those old mining charges we scavenged. She nodded, already pulling up schematics. The plan was reckless. Flood the field with false signatures, luring the Council ships into a kill zone laced with human ingenuity. No high ground purity here, just scrap and spite. As the Reliant banked hard, evading a probing shot that lit the void in white fire, Kira triggered the release. Canisters tumbled out, blooming into holographic ghosts of larger vessels, their signals mimicking power surges and engine flares. The Council bit. 2 destroyers peeled off, accelerating toward the bait. Human gunners waited, breaths held until the enemy closed the net. Then the barrage. Torpedoes laced with improvised warheads, jury-rigged from reactor scrap to punch through shields with brute force. The first destroyer shattered, its hull blooming like a fractured eggshell, debris spiraling into the asteroids. But the second adapted, its beams slicing through the decoys with surgical calm. Alarms wailed on the bridge. Incoming! Elena shouted as the shot grazed the Reliance flank, shearing off a sensor array. Sparks flew and Kira's console flickered, data streams glitching. Lost primary targeting, she reported, voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. Elena swore, slamming a fist on her armrest. The stakes twisted tighter. Without it, the swarm faltered, frigates scattering under return fire. 2 more human ships winked out on the display, their crews silenced in an instant. Kira's hands blurred, bypassing safeties, overloading secondaries, routing power from life support. The ship groaned, lights dimming as she hotwired the system. It was a gamble. Clever adaptation born of desperation. Humans trading comfort for survival. The makeshift array stabilized, just in time for the swarm to regroup. "Fire everything," Elena ordered. Missiles streaked, a messy hail that overwhelmed the destroyer's defenses. It erupted in a silent fireball, the shockwave nudging asteroids into lazy tumbles. The bridge exhaled. Elena clapped Kira's shoulder, a rare grin breaking through. Low ground works. But she stared at the tally. 3 human losses, the Reliant limping with patched wounds. The Council's main fleet loomed larger now, their formation tightening like a noose. Kira met her gaze. "We hold. For the ones we can't bring back." As the Reliant pushed forward, the void ahead crackled with unresolved fury. Elena gripped the armrests of her command chair, the Reliant's bridge humming with the low thrum of overtaxed engines. The view screen painted the Council's fleet in stark relief. Sleek destroyers flanking a central cruiser, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian under the distant starlight. Kira stood at her station, fingers dancing over the tactical console, her face a mask of focused calm. "They're adjusting vectors, Captain. Closing the gap in 15 minutes if we don't burn harder." Marco, ever the engineer with his grease-streaked jumpsuit and no-nonsense ponytail, patched in from below decks. "Engines are at 112%, sir. One more push like that last volley, and we'll be drifting scrap. But I've got an idea. Reroute auxiliary power to the forward shields. It'll give us a breathing room, maybe enough to flank their left wing." Elena nodded, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. The losses from the skirmish still echoed in her mind. 3 good ships gone, crews vaporized in the void. No time for grief, though. The Council had evolved past such inefficiencies, or so their broadcasts claimed. Superior beings dictating terms from their evolutionary pedestal. Humanity? We clawed from the mud, Elena thought, and that mud made us flexible. "Do it, Marco." Kira, plot that flank. "We're not charging head-on. We're the rats in the walls." The Reliant shuddered as power surged, shields flaring blue against the black. Alarms blared softly, a proximity warning as a Council probe darted too close, scanning their hull like a predator's sniff. Kira's hands blurred. "Incoming scan. Jamming it now." Static crackled over comms, the probe signal fracturing into digital noise. But it bought them nothing. The fleet's lead destroyer peeled off, weapons hot, accelerating toward their position. "They're targeting our maneuver," Kira said, her tone clipped. "If we commit to the flank, that destroyer pins us." Elena leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the tactical overlay. The Council's formations were textbook. Efficient, predictive, every ship a cog in their grand machine. Humans fought dirty, though, improvising where perfection cracked. "Marco, what's the status on those salvaged mines from the asteroid field?" His voice crackled back, laced with that wry edge he saved for impossible asks. "Prepped and loaded, but deploying them blind in this soup? We'll light up like a beacon." "Better a beacon than a corpse," Elena replied. "Kira, sync with Marco, lay a trail, make it look like we're dumping debris to mask our exhaust." The plan snapped into motion. Kira fed coordinates to the launch tubes, her breaths measured against the rising tension. The Reliant twisted, engines flaring as it veered toward the flank. Behind them, a string of mines ejected. Council tech, repurposed from the debris of their earlier kill. They tumbled innocently at first, mimicking wreckage, until Kira triggered the arming sequence remotely. The destroyer closed fast, its sensors likely dismissing the debris as irrelevant. Then one mine clipped its flank, a bloom of fire erupting silently. Chain reactions followed, explosions rippling through the trail, shredding the destroyer's shields in a cascade of plasma. It veered wildly, secondary blasts crumpling its hull. "Direct hit," Kira murmured, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. But the victory soured quick. The cruiser's batteries opened up, lancing beams that grazed the Reliant's rear. Alarms wailed. A bulkhead somewhere groaned under the strain. "Marco!" Elena barked. "Hull breach and engineering auxiliary sealing it now. Lost 2 crew in the hit." Her words hung heavy, another tally on the board. The Reliant pressed the flank, slipping past the reeling destroyer toward the fleet's vulnerable edge. Elena watched the cruisers adjust, their evolutionary algorithms recalculating. But humans didn't calculate. We adapted on the fly, trading lives for inches. "Keep pushing," she said. "We're in their blind spot now." Kira glanced at her, her cautious nature warring with the fire in her gut. "This low-ground play, it's costing us everything." "And it'll cost them more," Elena shot back, defiant. The void ahead pulsed with potential. The Council's noose tightening, but not quite closed. Elena gripped the armrests as the Reliant shuddered, alarms blaring in staccato bursts. "Status on the breach?" she demanded, eyes locked on the tactical display where red icons swarmed like angry hornets. Marco wiped sweat from his brow, fingers flying across his console. "Sealed, but we're venting atmosphere in secondary systems. Lost pressure in the lower decks. Anyone down there is gone." His voice cracked just a fraction, the weight of those words etching lines deeper into his face. He was the steady one, the engineer who patched hulls and hearts alike. But even he faltered now. Kira leaned forward, her cautious eyes narrowing at the holoscreen. "They're adapting faster than we thought. That destroyer we clipped? It's already vectoring back, and the cruisers are forming a pincer. If we push the blind spot, we'll be sandwiched." Elena nodded, jaw set. Humans didn't flinch from the squeeze, they wedged in harder. "Helm, full burn on auxiliary thrusters. Get us under their sensor arc. Use the debris field for cover." The ship groaned in response, engines straining against the void's pull. The faint glow of shattered hull fragments streaking past the viewport like fleeting ghosts. The bridge lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced across Kira's face. She shot Elena a look, part warning, part resolve. "This is suicide, Elena. We're trading crew for a shot at their flank, but one lucky hit and we're vapor." "Better. Vapor than surrender," Elena replied, voice low and unyielding. The Council's evolutionary edge meant perfect formations, unerring predictions, but they lacked the raw, desperate spark that turned cornered rats into wolves. "Marco, reroute power to forward shields. Prioritize the array." He complied without a word, his hands a blur, diverting energy from life support to buy them seconds. The air grew thinner, recyclers humming louder to compensate, a subtle reminder of the cost already paid. 2 crew lost in engineering, names Elena would etch later, if there was a later. A proximity alert wailed as the destroyer closed, its beams lancing out in precise arcs. The Reliant jinked, thrusters firing in erratic bursts, but one shot grazed the dorsal fin. Sparks erupted from a panel near Kira's station, and she batted away a loose wire, cursing under her breath. "Shields at 40%, Marco reported, his tone clipped. "We can't take another like that." Elena scanned the display, mind racing through options. The Council's algorithms would anticipate a straight evasion. Dodge left, they'd counter. Feint right, they'd overlap fire. But humans thrived in the mess, the uncalculated. "Reverse thrust on port side now. Flip us into a tumble." The helmsman blinked but punched the command. The Reliant spun wildly, orientation flipping end over end, tumbling toward the debris like a discarded toy. Beams from the destroyer sliced through empty space where they'd been moments before, the attacker's perfect math thrown off by the chaos. Kira braced against the spin, her face paling. "You're rolling us into the junk? One wrong piece and we're holed again." "Trust the play," Elena said, forcing calm into her voice. The viewport filled with wreckage, twisted metal from an earlier skirmish, the graveyard of less adaptive ships. As the Reliant stabilized amid the clutter, cloaked in the sensor clutter, the Council's icons hesitated, their vaunted evolution recalibrating for the unpredictable. Marco patched in auxiliary sensors, his screen blooming with data. "We're ghosts now. Their locks are breaking. We've got a window to the carrier's underbelly." Elena allowed a grim smile. "All batteries, fire at will. Hit the weak points, the joints, the vents. Make them bleed." Torpedoes streaked from the Reliant's tubes, weaving through the debris like guided knives. Explosions bloomed against the carrier's hull, orange fireballs venting atmosphere in geysers. The massive ship listed, its evolutionary armor cracking under improvised assault. But victory came with teeth. A return salvo clipped their aft section, and the deck bucked violently. Consoles sparked, and Kira's station went dark, smoke curling up. "Comms down," she gasped, yanking free a burning panel. "We're blind back there." Marco scrambled to jury-rig a fix, his tools clattering. "I can bridge it, but it'll take power from weapons. We fire blind after this." "Do it," Elena ordered, the ship's hum deepening as systems shifted. The Reliant pressed on, a battered needle threading the Council's noose, every inch bought with sweat and sacrifice. As the carrier reeled, secondary, explosions rippling along its length, Kira met Elena's gaze. Her caution had hardened into something fiercer. "We might actually pull this off." "Not might," Elena said, watching the tactical board light up with fresh hits. "We will." The void reclaimed its silence, broken only by the distant thunder of battle, as the Reliant carved deeper into the fray. Elena gripped the command rail as the Reliant shuddered, debris pinging off the hull like frantic hail. The carrier's wreckage loomed on the viewscreen, a mangled beast spewing plasma in lazy arcs. "Status on the breach?" she barked, eyes locked forward. Kira leaned over the sensor array, her fingers dancing across the flickering console. "Hull integrity holding at 60%, but the Council's reinforcements are vectoring in. 3 frigates closing fast. They'll cut us off from the jump point in 2 minutes." Marco wiped sweat from his brow, soldering the last wire into the makeshift relay. Sparks danced at his fingertips, but the engineering panel stabilized with a soft chime. "Power reroute complete. Shields are back online, but navigation's glitchy. One wrong turn and we kiss the asteroid field goodbye." "Copy that," Elena said, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She punched coordinates into the helm, the ship groaning as thrusters fired. The Reliant banked hard, slipping through a narrow gap in the debris cloud. Alarms wailed, a proximity alert. One frigate had anticipated the move, its turrets swiveling to track them. "Incoming fire," Kira shouted, bracing as the first salvo streaked past, close enough to rattle the deck plates. Elena slammed the evasion controls. The ship twisted, engines screaming in protest. A glancing hit rocked them, lights dimming for a heartbeat before emergency backups kicked in. "Evasive pattern Delta. Marco, can we squeeze more out of the mains?" He shook his head, already prying open another access panel. "They're redlining. If I push harder, we risk a cascade failure. But I've got an idea. Repurpose the auxiliary coolant vents. It'll vent heat like a flare, might buy us a blind spot." "Do it," she ordered, trusting his instincts. The vents hissed, open, spewing a shimmering cloud that expanded rapidly, refracting sensor readings. The frigate's shots went wide, carving into the void. Kira whooped, a rare crack in her composure. "It's working. They're firing blind. Gained us 30 seconds. But the reprieve was short. The lead frigate adjusted, its AI compensating for the interference. Beams lanced through the cloud, one shearing off a sensor array with a deafening crunch. Sparks erupted from Kira's station. She yanked her hands back, cursing under her breath. "Lost long range," she reported, voice tight. "We're down to visual only. And that asteroid field's no joke, dense as a beehive." Elena scanned the viewscreen, the rocks tumbling in silent chaos ahead. The jump point shimmered beyond, a rippling tear in space promising escape. But the path was a gauntlet, and the Council ships were herding them straight into it. No room for error. "Helm, plot the tightest weave you can. Kira, eyes on those frigates. Call the shots." The Reliant plunged into the field, boulders the size of shuttles hurtling past. Elena felt the strain in every jolt, the ship protesting like a living thing. A massive rock loomed dead ahead. She yanked the stick, grazing it by inches. Dust billowed, coating the hull. "Frigate 2's flanking us low," Kira said, pointing at a blip on the auxiliary display. "They're lining up a torpedo spread." Marco's eyes widened. "If that hits in this soup, we're vapor. Elena, we need a distraction, something to draw their fire." She nodded, mind racing. Human grit meant thinking dirty, not clean. "Rig the cargo bay. Dump the spare fuel cells, make it look like we're venting reactors. It'll draw them in like sharks. Marco hesitated for a split second. Those cells were their backup lifeblood. But then he was moving, barking orders to the auxiliary systems. The bay doors ground open and cells ejected in a glittering trail, igniting on contact with micrometeorites. A false explosion bloomed, bright and convincing. The flanking frigate bit hard, veering to pursue the dying ship. Its torpedoes chased the decoy, detonating in a spectacular fireball that lit the asteroids like a bonfire. "Nice one," Kira said, a grin flashing before tension reclaimed her face. But the lead ship's not fooled. It's accelerating straight for us. The view screen filled with the frigate's prow, weapons hot. Elena's hands flew over the controls, weaving through a cluster of spinning rocks. One clipped the wing, metal shrieking, but they held course. The jump point grew closer, tantalizingly near. "Shields at 20%, Marco warned. "One more hit and we're done." A beam grazed them, buckling a strut. Alarms blared, red lights painting the bridge in bloody hues. Elena tasted blood from a split lip, ignored it. "Hold together." "Almost there." Kira's voice cut through the din. Council signatures spiking. They're prepping a blockade field. "If we don't jump now, we're trapped." The Reliant surged forward, engines at breaking point. The frigate fired a final volley, but the asteroids interfered, scattering the shots. Elena timed it perfectly, threading the needle into the jump window. Space folded around them, the ship stretching into hyperspace with a thunderous roar. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing. Marco slumped against his console. "We made it. But those fuel cells, we're light on reserves now. Next leg's gonna be rough." Elena unstrapped, meeting their eyes. "Rough's what we do." "Plot course for the rally point. We've got a war to finish." The stars blurred outside, a promise of battles yet to come. Elena gripped the armrest as the Reliant shuddered out of hyperspace, the rally point materializing like a ghost in the void. The sensor sweep lit up the bridge with urgent pings. Dozens of human ships, ragged and battle-scarred, holding formation around a hulking salvage rig. Marco's fingers flew across his panel, cross-referencing signatures. "Captain Voss's fleet is here, but they're down to half strength. Council pickets are closing in from the outer rim. ETA 20 minutes. She nodded, voice steady despite the knot in her gut. "Hail them. Tell Voss we're linking up, and get me a status on those fuel cells." The comm crackled to life, Voss's gravelly tone cutting through. "Elena, you stubborn son of a bitch. Thought the frigate got you." Elena leaned into the pickup. "Takes more than that. We've got intel on their blockade patterns, weak spots we can exploit, but we need to consolidate now." The docking clamps engaged with a metallic groan, and Elena led the way to the rig's command deck, Marco and Kira at her flanks. Kira, the wiry engineer with a perpetual squint, muttered under her breath. "This tub's held together with spit and prayers. One good hit." Marco shot her a look. "Then don't let it take a hit." The airlock hissed open, revealing Voss, a broad-shouldered veteran with a cybernetic eye that whirred as it focused on them. Flanking him were his lieutenants, Mira, sharp-eyed and tactical, and Thomas, the cautious medic who always carried extra stim packs. Voss clasped Elena's forearm. "Briefing in 5. Council's evolutionary counselors are broadcasting surrender terms, claiming moral superiority, saying we're barbarians for fighting dirty." Elena snorted. "Let them preach. We've got the numbers here, but not for long." They crowded into the dim ops room, hollow screens flickering with fleet dispositions. The Council Armada loomed on the edge of the display, a pristine wall of sleek cruisers enforcing their high ground, superior tech, unyielding doctrine, no quarter for lesser species like humanity. Marco patched in the latest scans. "Their blockade field's modulating, it's adaptive, learning from our jumps. If we punch through conventionally, we'll lose half the fleet." Kira scratched her chin, eyes narrowing at the power readouts. "Those cells of ours are shot. But if we daisy-chain the salvage rig's reactors," Voss interrupted, pointing. "Risky. One overload and we're debris." Tension rippled through the group. Thomas shifted uneasily, while Mira traced vectors on the hollow. "We adapt or die." "Elena, your call." The first Council probe drones slipped into range, their energy lances probing the human perimeter. Alarms wailed as a corvette took a grazing hit, venting atmosphere in a silent plume. Elena slammed her fist on the console. "Kira, rig the chain, overload protocol if needed." "Marco, sync our navs with Voss's wing." "Mira, you handle the feint." Draw their fire to the flanks. Orders flew terse and sharp, the team scattering to stations. The Reliant detached with a jolt, engines flaring as it fell into position. Kira's voice crackled over comms from engineering. Linking reactors, it's holding but hot. 80% sync, Marco called out. Probes incoming, evasive pattern delta. The ship bucked as Elena took the helm, weaving through the opening salvo. A drone exploded against the shields, sparks dancing across the view screen.
Voss, now!
She barked. The veteran fleet surged, Mira's squadron darting like hornets to bait the Council's line. But the blockade field hummed to life, a shimmering net contracting around the rally point. Human ships strained against it, hulls groaning under the pressure. Thomas's voice broke through from the medbay. Casualties mounting, relays hit bad. Elena felt the weight settle, the plan fraying at the edges. Marco's console sparked, his face pale. Field's adapting faster than we thought. We're pinned. In the chaos, Kira's ingenuity sparked. From the bowels of the Reliant, she jury-rigged a feedback loop, siphoning excess power from the chained reactors into an improvised pulse emitter. Captain, vent it now, aim for their field generators. Elena didn't hesitate, fingers dancing over controls. The Reliant's forward bays glowed, unleashing a raw electromagnetic surge that ripped through the void. The blockade wavered, nodes frying in chain reactions. Council cruisers faltered, their vaunted superiority cracking under the brutal hack. Voss's fleet pressed the breach, lasers carving paths, but victory bit back. A feedback surge tore through the daisy chain, the salvage rig erupting in a fireball that claimed 2 corvettes and lit the stars with human debris. Elena steered clear, the Reliance frame rattling from the shockwave. Marco slumped, whispering, "We broke it, but at what cost?" The armada scattered, the Council's moral edifice crumbling as human ships poured through the gap. Voss's voice hailed, triumphant yet edged.
Elena, you crazy bastard.
We own the lane. As the Reliant limped toward the frontier, Elena stared at the drifting wrecks, friends lost to the low ground they'd claimed without apology. Elena gripped the Reliant's command rail, the metal still warm from the overload relays firing in sequence. The view screen flickered with the aftermath. Twisted hulls spinning lazily against the nebula's glow, emergency beacons winking like dying fireflies. Voss's fleet reformed ahead, a ragged V of human ships cutting through the debris field toward the uncharted jump point. The Council's retreat had turned into a rout, their pristine cruisers limping back to core space, broadcasts silent for the first time in the war. "Captain," Marco said from the nav console, his voice steady but laced with fatigue. He wiped sweat from his brow, fingers leaving a streak of grease. "Jump calculations are green, but the rig's feedback left us with hull microfractures. One bad ripple and we're venting atmo." Elena nodded, eyes fixed on the drifting Corvette wreckage, the Ulysses, her sister's ship. "Patch what you can. We're not stopping now." She keyed the comms. "Boss, status on the lane?" The Admiral's face appeared, scarred and grinning through static. "Clear as it'll get, Elena. Council's evolutionary high ground? It's ash. But we've got pickets inbound from their reserves. Fast movers, the kind that glass colonies without a vote." Marco leaned in, plotting evasion vectors. His hands moved with the precision of someone who'd jury-rigged half the ship's systems mid-battle. "If we daisy-chain the remaining relays, we can mask our signature. Buy time to slip the noose." Elena considered it, the weight of command settling like dust after a blast. The moral low ground had gotten them this far. Hacks that bypassed ethics protocols. Salvage rigs turned weapons, no quarter asked or given. But staring at the wrecks, she felt the cost etch deeper. "Do it, Voss, you take point. We'll cover the flank." The fleet accelerated, engines humming in unison. Alarms chirped as Council scouts appeared on the edge of sensors. Sleek darts, their hulls shimmering with adaptive shields. Voss's lead cruiser unleashed a salvo, missiles blooming into fireballs that lit the void. The Reliant shuddered as Marco linked the daisy chain, his console sparking under the strain. "Feedback building," he warned, fingers flying. "It's unstable, could fry the core." "Hold it together," Elena snapped, strapping into the crash seat. A scout veered toward them, weapons hot. She fired the point defense grid manually, lasers stitching the black until the enemy fragmented in a silent burst. But another slipped through, raking the Reliant's side. Klaxons wailed. A bulkhead groaned somewhere below. Marco cursed, rerouting power. Lost auxiliary drive. We're down to impulse. Voss's voice cut in, urgent. Elena, break off! We've got the lane. Don't play hero. But Elena saw the opening. The scout's debris cloud. Dense enough to hide a slingshot maneuver. Marco, angle us into that wreck field. Use the Ulysses hull as a shield. He hesitated, eyes flicking to the drifting corvette. That's suicide. The mass will shear us apart. Trust the low ground, she said, meeting his gaze. We improvise or we join the stars. He nodded, jaw set, and punched the thrusters. The Reliant dove into the debris, hull scraping against frozen metal. Shrapnel pinged off the armor like hail on a tin roof. Voss's fleet drew fire, buying seconds while the scouts pursued, their beams slicing through the cloud. Inside, red lights pulsed. A conduit burst in engineering, sparks raining down. Elena hauled herself to the breach, sealing it with a plasma torch while Marco held course. The nav screen showed the jump point swelling ahead, a tear in space promising freedom. One scout closed, its torpedo lock beeping shrill. Marco vented plasma from the fractured hull, a desperate feint mimicking a reactor breach. The enemy veered, buying the precious gap. Voss's barrage caught it broadside, the explosion washing the Reliant in heat. Jump primed, Marco shouted. Elena dropped back to the bridge, breathless. All hands brace. The stars stretched, the Reliant leaping through the rift. Behind, the debris field erupted as the last scouts met their end. Voss's voice echoing in the comms. They're through. Humanity holds the frontier. The ship emerged into uncharted space, engines coughing to a halt. Marco slumped in his chair, scanning for pursuit. None. Just endless black dotted with unfamiliar stars. Elena unstrapped, staring at the console's glow. The war wasn't over. The council would regroup, their high ground rebuilt on fresher lies. But here in the low ground they'd claimed humanity breathed free. They'd won this round, scars and all. We keep moving, Elena said, voice firm. No apologies.